I'm Selena Wang in for Caroline Hyde, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, 9 months after the historic vote, the process of Brexit is officially underway. We'll discuss what it means for the UK's $25 billion fintech industry. Plus, Samsung hopes to put a $6 billion PR crisis in the past. We'll discuss the debut of the S8. And we'll hear from the UK-based Shazam CEO Rich Riley. What does Brexit mean for the music app? But first, to our lead. It's now official. The United Kingdom triggers Article 50. Prime Minister Theresa May vows to get the best deal for the UK, while EU leaders vow to seek an orderly withdrawal. But what transpires over the next 2 years could have a huge impact on the UK economy and cause a ripple effect across the globe. The fintech industry is sure to feel the impact. It's been growing rapidly in the UK, totaling $25 billion in annual revenue. With me in New York, Joe Cross, U.S. General Manager at TransferWise, a UK-based peer-to-peer money transfer firm. Investors include PayPal co-founder Max Levchin, Peter Thiel's Valor Ventures, and Richard Branson. Joe, your company has been very public and outspoken about its thoughts on Brexit. They did not want the UK to leave the EU. So what have things been like so far? What's the outlook on the company?
Yeah, it's been a very, very interesting time, as you can imagine, for everyone involved in Brexit, in fintech, and more widely in the UK, of course. So, perhaps if I just explain a little bit about why this is especially relevant for TransferWise. So, we're a platform for moving money between countries. So, a huge amount of our customers are people who live international lives across borders. So the Brexit vote obviously was very averse to one of the things that our customers feel most deeply about, which is being able to live the lives they live across borders. And secondly, within the company, a lot of our staff are also people who have come to London or to our other offices around the world. They identify with the problem that we solve, which is expensive international bank transfers. And they have that problem because they live these international lives. So by definition, a lot of our staff are people who are internationals.
And I want to kick it off to Aaron Klein, who is now joining us. He's a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C. Aaron, you've written quite extensively on Brexit and the adverse impacts. I want to get your thoughts on just how much is fintech going to be left behind after Brexit?
Oh, yeah. No, look, there's no question that London had positioned itself to be a global fintech leader. It was a rare city that included finance and technology. But Brexit's kind of thrown that all into mix. As Joe was saying, it's going to be hard to do business now and going forward with the uncertainty about what's going to happen in terms of London's position as a global financial leader and your basic ability to do business within the continent of Europe. To use a more British terminology, it's an own goal. They were ahead in the global race on fintech, and they just scored on themselves. The rest of the world is going to catch up.
Right. I mean, the UK government had invested significant amount in this, so it'll be interesting to see how much that puts them behind. A big thing that tech companies have been worried about is this passporting policy that allows companies that get regulated in the UK to be able to sell their services elsewhere in the EU. Just how damaging is this particular potential policy change going to be to fintech companies?
Well, I mean, it would be tremendously damaging if you don't have the ability to go into Europe and need to have a totally different into the continent regulatory regime. Furthermore, the uncertainty about what's going to end up in being passporting will drive investment choices today. If you were a new fintech, why would you go to London? Why wouldn't you go to Berlin or Amsterdam or Silicon Valley or even New York? I mean, it's a double whammy about what's going to happen and the uncertainty between now and then.
Well, Joe, Aaron said it. I mean, how are you guys preparing for this potential loss of passporting rights?
I mean, as Aaron said, London is one of the few cities in the world that has the meeting of finance and tech. So I think that's a really important context to look at here. Those conditions don't exist, regardless of what happens with Brexit, in many of the other cities where you do have either finance or tech. And it takes a lot to build a fintech hub, a huge amount. And actually, perhaps New York is one of the few other cities around the world that does have the talent in both finance and tech. To passporting, it's one we just have to see how it pans out. The other thing is obviously the rights of EU nationals living in the UK, which are both important for our team and our customers. The timeline, though, is just going to be very long. I think one thing it's important to think about is how quick startups and tech companies move and how slow policy moves. So, looking at something that was that happened today, it's a 2-year process before anything would even start to be actioned, and then there's whatever timeline those actions take. So really, it's a different time frame, and obviously we're thinking about different scenarios, but in terms of what it means day to day, honestly, for us and the wider sector in the UK, it's pure business as usual.
Right, there's obviously much still to be determined, but in terms of this passporting thing, are you guys looking to get regulated in another EU city just to hedge against the potential outcomes?
It's something that we might look at, yeah. I mean, so with all of our expansion comes being regulated in a new country, and that's one of the fundamental assets that TransferWise is building is that we're building our own network in as many countries as we can. And today, it's about 60 countries we have customers in. So it's very much part of our normal modus operandi to go and get regulated. So if it is something that we have to do, it's not something we worry about at all. No one's losing any sleep over that.
Joe, come to America, because our remittance system of international money transmission is way too slow, is way too costly. We could use innovation to make people's lives better, and fintech offers that. And I would like to welcome you with open arms to try and solve these problems in the U.S., because we have real problems in the area that you're trying to solve.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's great to hear. I mean, we are operational here. Where our customers here have already processed about $2 billion through TransferWise in the US. So yeah, we're very much here, and it's great to hear you validate that the country needs us.
And Joe,
it absolutely does. I mean, and then the president goes and says these crazy things that we're going to use remittances to pay for the wall, and it also has a chilling effect. Language from political leaders matters in terms of where businesses locate, particularly in high tech and innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way we see it, people that live across borders or in other countries have a pretty rough deal today, and anything that we can do to make their lives a little bit easier is good for them.
Right, and I mean, on that note, TransferWise is very multicultural. As you mentioned, you have a lot of EU nationals working for the company, I'm assuming. How are you guys thinking about this visa problem? Is it a big concern?
Again, it's exactly as I said, it's business as usual, and the timelines will determine as and when we need to start actually thinking about it. I mean, a lot of the rhetoric around what Theresa May and what Britain will push for in whatever the negotiations deliver is that the rights of EU nationals in the UK is a top priority, and similarly the rights of Brits in Europe. So I think we just have to put our faith in Theresa May that when she says that, she means it.
And Aaron, it is no longer clear for UK fintech startups if that's the place to be to access the EU single market. Given all of this non-clarity, do you think that investors should put their money somewhere else outside of London, maybe Berlin, Paris?
Yeah, no, I think the FinTech Europe hub is now up for grabs. I mean, London had a clear advantage. They had a good regulatory regime. They had the finance and technology. They had a multicultural system. They had worker talent in place, transportation, all these things. And then poof, that all went to the wayside. And so you do have a series of other cities. Now, as Joe pointed out, some are finance hubs like Paris or Frankfurt. Some are more technology hubs like Berlin. I think Amsterdam's an interesting city that's in play. And I wouldn't knock out the United States from this conversation, both New York and Silicon Valley, where there's been tremendous inflow of capital into fintech in the US, and a very strong US, UK, EU global integrated economy that hopefully can allow for innovation to come and improve the system.
All right, well, there is just so much ground for us to cover here. Joe Cross, U.S. General Manager at TransferWise, and Aaron Klein, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institute. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And now on to a story that we're watching. A major blow was dealt to consumer protection advocates Tuesday when the U.S. House of Representatives voted to overturn FCC broadband privacy rules. In a 215 to 205 vote, largely along party lines, House Republicans moved to dismantle rules that required broadband companies to get explicit customer permission before using or sharing their personal data. The data in question includes health information, website browsing history, app usage, and the geographic information from mobile devices. The rules also intend to tighten data security requirements. The action follows a similar vote in the Senate last week and will now be brought to President Trump, who's expected to sign the bill into law. And still to come, Samsung unveils a brand new flagship phone with half a year head start on Apple. So is this device that puts the company back on the top of the global smartphone market? We'll discuss next. This is Bloomberg. Samsung is trying to move on from the PR nightmare of its last major product rollout. In a flashy New York unveiling earlier today, the company showed off a brand new flagship smartphone, putting the emphasis on modernized features instead of potential bodily harm. Bloomberg's Caitlin Meehan reports.
Samsung has unveiled its new flagship Android smartphone called the Galaxy S8, and the company knows it's got to get this one right. That's because Samsung's last major launch, the Galaxy Note 7, ended in disaster. Users posted incendiary videos like this one, showing the phone capable of overheating and catching fire. Samsung cited issues with faulty batteries, and after 2 rounds of global recalls, the entire Note 7 crisis is estimated to have cost the company more than $6 billion. What's more, it may have also cost Samsung its lead in the global smartphone market. According to Gartner, Apple's share of sales edged past Samsung ever so slightly in the final quarter of 2016, by a margin of just 256,000 phones. Before that, Samsung had beat Apple every quarter since the end of 2014. Which brings us to Samsung's comeback attempt, the S8. It comes in 2 sizes, both of which are larger than the latest iPhones. The Samsung logo has been removed from the front of the phone to make more space to use the screen. The S8 also comes with encrypted facial recognition and a virtual assistant named Bixby to give Samsung users an equivalent to Apple's Siri or Amazon's Alexa. But of course, there's still the question, is it safe?
At Samsung, safety has always been our priority.
The company has been touting a new 8-point battery safety check in commercials released earlier this year. Investors appear confident, with Samsung shares trading near a record high. But Samsung faces another test later this year, when Apple is expected to roll out the 10th anniversary version of the iPhone.
That was Bloomberg's Caitlin Meehan. So, is this the product that turns around Samsung's fortunes? Joining us now from Newton, Massachusetts is Ramon Llamas. He researches the wearable and mobile phone market for IDC. Also with us from our San Francisco bureau, Techonomy CEO and guest host for this hour, David Kikpatrick. Ramon, I want to kick things off with you. It's been a rough few months for Samsung. It's just been one negative headline after another. We had the exploding smartphones. Now we have the heir apparent that's caught up in this corruption scandal. Okay, so can one phone really turn all of this around?
I think one phone is a very important first step to getting this turned around. But we shouldn't just look at the phone just itself, because in and of itself, it's a beautiful phone. It's an elegant device. But if you look at the past several months, you take a look at what Samsung has done. A very thorough investigation, extremely transparent with the process, an 8-point process that they're very comfortable with in terms of quality control, to the point where they're trying to champion it and advise some of its competitors to adopt. So when you put all that together, I have to think that Samsung is feeling very confident that they've solved the problem, they've addressed the issue numerous times. Even today, at today's presentation, they've referenced what happened and underscored their commitment to quality and safety numerous times without having to rehash the whole thing again. So as far as this device is coming out as the first flagship device after the battery debacle, it's a strong first step for Samsung.
So David, Ramon called this phone beautiful and elegant. It's come out with a smattering of additional features. I mean, what's the consumer reaction been like so far, though?
Well, it is beautiful, and I think Samsung really made a good move delaying its initially planned introduction from Mobile World Congress to now. It even helps underscore how seriously they take the process of getting it right before they release it. I think people are going to love this phone. Will it turn around the company's fortunes? That's another matter, because I think this company has, not Uber scale problems, but a lot of challenges facing it. And also they have a bigger challenge, which is that, as you mentioned Alexa earlier in Caitlin's report, but the fact is, the smartphone era is kind of ending, and we don't know exactly what's coming next, but that could be more important in the long term. In the short term, this phone will probably sell very well.
And I want to take a look at Samsung's market share. It actually fell below 20% in the fourth quarter for the first time in 4 years. Now, they obviously have competition coming from Apple on the high end, but they also have lots of up-and-comers like Oppo and Huawei. So, Ramon, what do you think is the main source of pressure there? What's causing this drop in market share?
Well, if you take a look at where Samsung is competing, it clearly has its position staked out in the high end of the market, where you see all the Galaxy S8 and the Galaxy Note devices. But as you go further on down the tiers into the mid-range, that's getting constantly squeezed. Then you go into that low range or entry-level range, usually about $150 and below. That's a dangerous part of the market to play for Samsung, even if they can get scale, because it ends up being a contest for how low can you price your smartphone. And if you look at some of the vendors, not Oppo or Huawei, but a number of smaller and regional companies that competing in all over in Asia that are willing to lose money in favor of gaining market share, and that's a very, very dangerous market to play in when the market itself is growing at about single-digit territory. So as far as the SA is concerned, this is really going to help Samsung cement its position in that high end, and hopefully generate some money, because let's face it, these are not inexpensive devices. So that's going to help Samsung in the long run too.
Right, you said it. These are going to be quite pricey, and in the meantime, it seems like the iPhone 7, 7 Plus are going to be the main competition until they come up with Apple comes up with their new updated phone. I mean, David, what's your initial reaction on how this may stack up to what's coming from Apple?
Well, one of the things that really matters is China, and it's not just because China has several competitors, but also because the market is so vast there. And I think it's also a country which is increasingly, in many industries, but in this one among others, putting special preference on local champions, of which Oppo and Huawei are two. And I think that's a challenge for both Apple and Samsung. I think probably this is going to kind of keep the competition with Apple relatively stable for the short term. The real open question is, how great is the next iPhone? And we don't really know yet. But if it's great, that could be. Apple still has a better brand than Samsung by a long shot. It still commands the sort of halo of the top of the market, and I don't see that changing.
And Ramon, before we move on, I want to get your thoughts on this big corruption scandal, heir apparent J.Y. Lee in jail. Does this cast a cloud over consumers? Do consumers even care?
Absolutely not. If anything, this may be a concern for investors and perhaps competitors in terms of analyzing Samsung's strategy going forward. But if you ask the next, let's say 20-year-old male camping out in line at your favorite carrier, is it really going to matter to you what the leadership is doing? Chances are he's going to say probably not. He wants to get his hands on this device and play with it from dawn till dusk.
Well, great analysis there. Ramon Llamas, research manager at IDC, thank you, as well as our guest host for the hour, David Kikpatrick, who's staying with us. And in the latest tech revolving door, Intel is moving up the head of its mobile device chip unit, Aisha Evans, to a broader role as Chief Strategy Officer. Evans has been leading Intel's drive to get itself into the larger and faster-growing smartphone chip business as its main PC business shrinks. The company began to make headway in that effort last year when Apple chose Intel over Qualcomm for the chips in some of its smartphones. Evans will now report to Intel CFO Bob Swan. And still ahead, Toshiba's Westinghouse unit files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, citing as much as $10 billion in debt. The tech giant is still facing challenges on several fronts. This is Bloomberg. Toshiba's U.S. nuclear unit Westinghouse has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Toshiba warns it may have to take a $6.2 billion write-down on the business. Westinghouse's technology forms the basis for about half the world's atomic reactors. It's been struggling with project delays, and Toshiba may sell a majority stake in the unit. And another huge IPO may be just around the corner. Axios reports BuzzFeed is prepping to go public next year. The report goes on to say CEO Jonah Peretti has turned down past bio offers because of its long-held plans for an IPO. BuzzFeed has been rapidly expanding from its inception as a site for viral content to a broader news, media, and tech platform. Among its biggest investors is NBC Universal. And Amazon stock hit a new record high. This after Barclays initiated the stock with an overweight rating. The company also announced it's shutting down its Quidsi division, which it acquired for about $545 million back in 2011. Amazon says it has been unable to make the owner of Diapers.com and Soap.com profitable. And thanks to Wednesday's stock gains, Amazon founder and CEO Jeff Bezos has become the world's second richest man. According to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, Bezos has a net worth of $75.6 billion. And coming up, Brexit is officially underway. The man at the helm of UK tech is the heavyweight Shazam CEO Rich Riley, and he joins us next with his outlook for tech startups in the country. And this Friday on Bloomberg Television, we'll hear from two Federal Reserve presidents. William Dudley and Jim Bullard will sit down with Bloomberg's Mike McKee. Be sure to catch both exclusive conversations. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. British Prime Minister Theresa May has triggered Article 50, marking the official beginning of the end of Britain's 44-year membership in the EU. A senior European diplomat says the union won't seek to punish Britain for leaving the bloc. French presidential candidate Marine Le Pen was told by the National Front treasurer 3 years ago that her party would have to plug its deficit with EU money. Le Pen was reportedly informed in a letter written in 2014 that her spending was spiraling out of control. The party is being investigated for potential misuse of parliament funds. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, says the organization is partnering with a, quote, corrupt government in Congo. She also supports a massive cut in the world's largest peacekeeping mission there. Her comments came a day after the bodies of an American and a Swedish investigator were found in a shallow grave. Arab leaders have reaffirmed a 2002 peace plan that offers Israel normal ties if it returns lands captured in the 1967 Mideast War. The declaration was issued at the end of the annual Arab Summit in Jordan. The Palestinians want East Jerusalem as their capital city. Japan's ruling party wants the country to arm itself with its first offensive weapon since World War II. It will also recommend improving the missile defense system. North Korea's missile tests is raising concerns. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Wednesday here in New York, 8:30 a.m. Thursday morning in Sydney. I'm joined by Bloomberg's Paul Allen. He has a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Elisa. It's looking like a pretty quiet day around the Asia Pacific today. If we take a look at the NZX up and running for 30 minutes now, it's looking pretty flat. ASX futures are pointing up by just 5 points. Once again, we'll be taking a close look at the retailer Myer today. It's been revealed that, as rumoured, Solomon Lew, the billionaire, was the man behind the purchase of a 10.7% stake in Myer that sent the stock soaring in the final 30 minutes of Monday trade. But he says his Premier Investments does not seek a full takeover. Over in Japan, Nikkei futures are looking a little weaker. Keep an eye again on Toshiba today. That company's been having a pretty bad year. There will be an extraordinary shareholder meeting today where shareholders will get to question management for the first time about that US nuclear unit bankruptcy and the possible sale of the chip unit as well. Toshiba losses projected to double to $9.1 billion. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Selena Wang, in for Caroline Hyde. As we mentioned at the top of the hour, UK Prime Minister Theresa May has officially triggered Article 50, kicking off the formal process of Brexit negotiations with the European Union. Technology was flagged as one of the British industries that would suffer the most in the wake of a Brexit vote. With access to funding and top tech talent, both major areas of concern. One tech company that knows a thing or two about the UK tech landscape is London-based Shazam, who despite Brexit has maintained that they will keep London as the center of the company's engineering. Joining us now, Shazam CEO Rich Riley, and still with us is my guest co-host for the hour, Techonomy CEO David Kirkpatrick in San Francisco. So Rich, you guys are keeping the headquarters in London, but you are opening a new office in Berlin. Yes. Did any of this fear of talent fleeing from the UK go into this calculus?
Well, the company grew up in London. London's been a great home for Shazam, and the thing we care most about with Brexit is our team. Our team in London is from over 30 nations, and we certainly hope it doesn't cause any anxiety or issues for them. And I hope, and I've discussed with the mayor of London and others, that London's ability to attract talent from around the world is one of the things that makes it truly special, and I think makes the UK economy a great place for technology companies like Shazam. And I certainly hope as they navigate through the so-called Brexit that they are able to maintain that.
Right, there's still much navigation to be done, but in the meantime, how are you guys gearing up for the potential changes?
In the meantime, we're keeping a close eye on it, but haven't really changed any of our, the way we're doing business or continuing to hire and retain our team in the UK.
Mm-hmm. And so Shazam has had some pretty big milestones lately, reached profitability, reached the $1 billion download mark. So what's in the works? How are you going to keep on getting more users to spend more time on the app?
Yeah, so we've got some really interesting things that we've done recently. One is that we're one of the only companies that's been integrated directly into Snapchat, and so users can now hold down the screen on Snapchat and it will Shazam and return an experience that so far users are really, really loving. And we have a lot of ideas for how to expand that. So putting Shazam places where people are, in addition to in our own apps, which have been downloaded over 1 billion times. We've also got a TV show coming, which we're very excited about. So on May 25th and every Thursday this summer at 9 o'clock on Fox will be the game show Beat Shazam, hosted by Jamie Foxx. So we've got Fox on Fox, and it's going to be an incredible modern version of Name That Tune. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we hope millions of people enjoy it. And a really, I think the first time an app has had a show, and we're doing it with Mark Burnett, who of course has done Apprentice and Survivor and everything. So we're really excited about that.
I'll definitely have to take a look at that when it comes out. And I'm going to turn it over to David.
Yeah, I just have a question. Shazam is one of the few companies that's really become a verb, right? And you just have done, frankly, from my point of view, even a better job than I would have guessed, not just surviving, but really thriving. And I'm just curious if you could talk about what do you think the single thing or one or two things are that you've done that really explain this, survival and more than survival, and really getting to this new position where you're, partnering with Snap and doing a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think one of the things we have done is we've never taken our eye off the ball in terms of being the best in the world at getting the user what they want when it comes to music. And so every day we wake up and try to make it faster and better and more accurate and pretend like we're just getting started. We're very proud that our user ratings are at all-time highs in both iOS and Android, and that's something we watch very, very closely. And so we're just constantly trying to earn our users' love, really, and they associate our brand with magic. And so internally we talk about delivering magic together, and every day we try to deliver more magic. And I think that focus and effort has proven in terms of the sustained popularity of the service.
And Shazam seems to really have taken a lead in terms of augmented reality marketing. You've already started some partnerships. How has that been going so far? I mean, do you think consumers are actually ready to really interact in this way? I
wouldn't mind, rather than commenting, if that's all right.
So our business model is primarily advertising, which has been a transition for us, and we launched the ability to visually Shazam things just over a year ago, and we've been watching augmented reality, and we just recently, a few weeks ago, launched what we believe is the first scaled augmented reality offering. And so now a brand can add augmented reality to any printed thing. and it's accessible through Shazam. And so there's a lot of augmented reality startups and capabilities, but there are very few that are on hundreds of millions of phones. And so we're bringing scale to augmented reality and making it easy for brands to create the experience. And so we're really excited about that, and we've got a few big campaigns coming up, and there's a lot of interest in the advertiser community as they try to figure out, what to do with augmented reality and how to bring things like packaging and print ads and other things to life.
Rich, I wanted to ask, this augmented reality thing does seem to make an awful lot of sense because we've already gotten used to sort of pulling out Shazam to sort of find things out about the world around us. And there really aren't many other apps like that. Maybe you could say Google Maps at a larger scale. But do you think of it that way, that sort of because people already have the habit of sort of Shazamming things with audio, that they might just sort of naturally segue over to a more visual experience there?
We do. We think that Shazam and our brand and our verb, it's really a one-tap connection to the world around you, and that is mostly used for music, but we have a camera now on the home screen, and we use that to connect people to brands. And so when we partner with the brand, they will put what we call a call to action on the packaging so that the user knows to Shazam it and what they get for Shazamming it, whether it's a chance to win something, behind the scenes experience, all kinds of different things that are value propositions for the user, and then the user can do that. And we're on hundreds of millions of Coke bottles this summer, for example, and lots of printed things around the world. So we do think it's a natural extension of our use case, but still, of course, a lot of user education required.
Now, Rich, I know you get this question all the time, but the company's been around since 1999, have raised over $100 million. What's the exit plan?
So the plan is to build the best Shazam we can. We were very proud to achieve cash flow profitability at the end of last year, which is a milestone that, as you know, many startups never achieve. And one of the great things about that milestone is you really put yourself in control of your own destiny. So, cash flow positive with plenty of cash gives you a lot of choices in terms of which way you go. And in the meantime, we'll keep building the company, doing big partnerships, doing great things with brands and TV shows. And we'll see.
You were on the show not too long ago, maybe just a couple years, and you said you guys were sprinting towards an IPO. Has that thinking changed?
Well, we're sprinting towards being an IPO-able company in terms of being a strong standalone company that has predictable revenue streams and growing revenue streams and is able to control its burn rate and be profitable in its user base. And so we're always trying to be a great standalone company, and then we'll decide whether that ends up in the public markets or as part of a bigger platform. We'll see.
What do you think your investors would want?
Oh, our investors want us to build the best company we can, and I think they all appreciate how rare it is to have a brand like Shazam that is truly known and loved by hundreds of millions of people around the world, and the cost of replicating a brand like that would be well north of $100 million. And so figuring out what all we can do with this brand and build on this platform, and they're all very excited about the future.
Well, Rich Riley, CEO of Shazam, I wish we could go on longer. We're going to have to stop there. And Techonomy's David Kirkpatrick, you are sticking with me. Now, coming up, Apple analysts remain bullish on the stock despite Samsung unveiling its latest smartphone. So where does Wall Street expect Apple's next big source of revenue to come from? We'll give you a hint. It's not iPhones. This is Bloomberg. Pinterest has set its sight on a new source of revenue. The company unveiled a new program called Pinterest Propel. It will provide special services like extra support in education and assistance in designing ads. The goal is to attract small and medium-sized businesses to the platform. Now, Pinterest is diversifying its advertising business ahead of a potential IPO with a target of more than $500 million in revenue this year. And we'll be speaking with Pinterest President Tim Kendall in an exclusive interview Thursday about this new initiative. And Apple shares edged up slightly in Wednesday trading, closing at a record price just over $144. Analyst Brian White from Drexel Hamilton raised his price target to $185 per share, calling it one of the most underappreciated stocks in the world. Longtime Apple watcher Gene Munster also released a bullish note focusing on revenue from Apple's services segment. These calls follow two other analysts increasing their price targets for the company. Still with us is David Kirkpatrick, Bloomberg contributing editor and CEO of Techonomy, and in New York is Alex Webb, who covers Apple for Bloomberg Technology. Alex, I want to kick it off with you. Today we had the big Samsung unveiling. Does that at all put a damper on all of this hype around Apple's impending iPhone for later this year?
Well, the thing we've seen is that Apple did capitalize quite significantly on the fact that Samsung did have a major recall last year. But one has to wonder whether Samsung in some ways jumped the gun. It gives them a certain amount of head start on Apple. The new iPhone we expect to come a little bit later this year. But the crucial quarter for any smartphone sales is Christmas. The 3 months leading up to Christmas, that's when the big sales are done. And Apple usually releases the product just ahead of that quarter. So, it's hard to make any particular judgment on the relative strength of either phone until we've got both out there in the market.
Right. And I want to get your thoughts on this chart. If we just take a look into my Bloomberg terminal, we can see that Apple has had some slowing iPhone sales growth, but if we see in that most recent quarter, there's been a bit of an uptick. I mean, what do you attribute that to?
Well, it was interesting in the last quarter of Apple sales that the growth which they experienced, they attributed to new customers. So not returning customers upgrading the iPhones they already have or swapping their old iPhones for new iPhones, but rather attracting customers from competitors like Samsung, for example. So that gave a lot of analysts positive food for thought. They kind of sat there and thought, well, if Apple releases a phone which isn't significantly better than the previous one and people still decide to switch to it, then the strength of the brand is holding up. If then you extrapolate that going forward and the expectation is then the iPhone 8 or iPhone 10 or whatever they decide to call it does prove to be the blockbuster product that everyone's expecting, then it means that they're expecting a sort of super cycle, huge sales of iPhones, and they're very optimistic about it.
And David, something that's become more apparent is that Apple really needs to build up this services part of its business as hardware continues to slow. Can Apple do that fast enough before Facebook and Google can expand into hardware even quicker?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Selena. I mean, I think it's pretty funny that somebody should call Apple one of the most underappreciated stocks and companies, considering it's the highest valued company in history. It's at an all-time peak. On the other hand, there is a certain logic to that, and both of those analysts you mentioned are very smart guys who've been around a long time. Apple's PE is way lower than Facebook or Google or Amazon, but that's because it's historically been a hardware company. So, hardware is, high margin, but, it's just not the same kind of growth business that software is by definition. You can't just make more with no cost. But if Apple could build its software and services business and actually get revenue from it, then they could really get into a new category and, believe it or not, even with their astonishing current valuation, build on that. I do think that's a possibility. However, do I see evidence of that happening yet? No, I don't. I think Apple has done a relatively poor job building a services and software business. And just one example I'd throw out is look at the Apple Maps compared to Google Maps. I mean, how many people on the iPhone routinely use Apple's Maps? It's only people who aren't aware of how good Google's Maps are. So they've got a real high bar to meet to do it, but it's possible.
I mean, what do you make of that? You recently had this great podcast about how they're really beefing up this app ecosystem they have. I mean, what are they really doing to make this better, the software services part?
I mean, David makes the killer point. Amazon trades at close to 180 times its earnings, right? And Apple trades at closer to 16. That's a massive, massive delta for them to fill. Now, what Apple has been doing, and that the one thing which drove growth above anything else in terms of the percentage growth it experienced, the absolute growth it experienced, was the App Store last year. Gene Munster estimated it grew 40% revenue last year. Now, it grew 40% to 8.6 billion. That equates to about 4% of its total revenue. So it's a tiny, tiny, tiny slice of the pie. But as David just said, it's very, very high margin. They're suddenly waking up to the fact they have got to give developers what they want if they're going to convince them to build apps which not only are compelling but drive returning revenue. And that's why they have the new business model which gives more subscription revenue to developers. Previously, the way that the App Store used to work is you might pay $4 for an app once, you might use it once or twice, and then you're not really given any reason to keep on using it. Now they really want developers to build apps which have a lifespan, which of course not only then drives returning revenue from the App Store, but it also makes the iPhone sticky. It makes it hard to trade in that iPhone for an Android because you are pumping data into it, which makes you dependent upon it.
Right. And David, really quick, I mean, which part of these software services do you think has the most potential? They have the cloud, they have music, apps?
In a way, it's the cloud. I mean, the real holy grail is annuity businesses. So if you can get people to pay you a subscription for something, and of course, music is subscription, and music is essentially a cloud service, those are the kinds of things you want to go toward. Anybody who can get that right has basically the ability to print money. And Apple, unfortunately, has not proven they can do it. I don't rule it out, like I said before.
All right. Well, David Kirkpatrick, Bloomberg contributor and CEO of Techonomy, thanks for joining us. And Bloomberg's Alex Webb, thanks for coming by the studios. Now, coal may have a dirty reputation, but China is attempting to clean that up. We'll bring you the latest from the world's biggest coal producers next. This is Bloomberg. Domino's will start using robots to deliver pizza in Europe. The 6-wheeled self-driving vehicles are made by Starship Technologies and will deliver pizza to customers in Germany and the Netherlands. So what's the catch? Customers must live within a mile of certain Domino's outlets. But this isn't the pizza chain's first rodeo with innovative technology. Domino's has tested ground-based autonomous vehicles for pizza delivery in Australia and delivered a pizza by drone in New Zealand. Now, while the Trump administration is vowing to invest more in coal, China is trying to take a global lead in cleaner technologies. China is the world's biggest CO2 emitter and coal producer. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel got an inside look at how the largest state-owned power generator is trying to scrub not only the skies, but also the dirty image of coal.
China feels this is one answer to its towering pollution problem, a new power plant that the industry likes to call a clean coal burner, spewing far less toxins than the older generators now shut down in Beijing. This plant, halfway to the port city of Tianjin, was opened in November by China Guodian, which, along with the World Coal Association, invited Bloomberg for an exclusive tour. Coal, we all know, is cheap and abundant, but it's the world's biggest source of carbon emissions. China is moving to more renewable forms of power generation, but Bloomberg Intelligence says coal still accounts for nearly 75% of China's energy mix, down from 84% a decade ago, but the move to renewables takes time.
Coal should retain its dominance in China's energy supply. First off, China is rich in coal and has less gas and oil. And secondly, it's a fact that there are many poor people in China. Coal is the energy for poor people.
What China is doing at the moment is building new coal-fired power plants that are cleaner than gas plants. They're cleaner than the average coal-fired power plant that operates in many of the developed economies of the world today.
Guodian says it doesn't measure CO2 emissions on site, but we could see what they call the SOx and NOx, the emissions of sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide that they say, thanks to a desulfurization scrubbing process, are about 10 times less than a traditional thermal coal plant. The government gets this data real time and can punish the plant if emissions get too high.
These levels of SOx and NOx, you're going to find they're lower than typical European or US standards.
Burning cleaner coal does have its costs. Guodian says it's spending a little more than $1 billion over the next 2 years installing the clean coal tech at a time when China's coal and power industries are in forms of crisis.
They've overbuilt. There's more overcapacity in electric power generation than any other sector in China. The utilization rates of capacity are down in the neighborhood of 50–60%. This is an industry with extraordinarily high fixed costs, and when the utilization rates fall that low, there are huge losses.
To be sure, the World Coal Association, as industry lobbyist, wants the world to use more, but it argues that President Trump's plan for reviving the U.S. coal industry can lead to cleaner solutions.
We believe that President Trump will be looking at this sort of technology for deployment in the U.S.
Doesn't hurt your sales pitch either when the weather does its part on one of the clearest blue sky days so far this year. Stephen Engel, Bloomberg News, Langfang, China.
That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. On Thursday's program, we'll be speaking with Pinterest President Tim Kendall in an exclusive interview. And remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are now live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays at 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And that's all for now. From New York, this is Bloomberg.